All right, y'all. I'm going to talk about my take on the Blake Lively Justin Baldoni case. I have avoided talking about this case for a long time for a multitude of reasons. It's because, honestly, it's rich people mess, and I'm not emotionally invested in either of them. I don't know none of y'all. And I think the reason I'm talking about it right now is because I've seen people saying in my comments for my last video about Taylor Swift and Blake Lively in those texts, saying just because nobody likes Blake Lively doesn't mean that she cannot be sexually harassed. And I really do think that Blake Lively does really fit my imperfect victim thing. So I want to make sure that I'm approaching this in a nuanced way for consistency, okay? And at the end of the day, like, my last video was algorithm candy girl, okay? So it's like I wasn't being super nuanced, but I do want to make a nuanced take now, and that's what I'm going to be doing, okay? So what is my baseline position on this case? I believe that Blake Lively's sexual discomfort was real and valid, okay? And I believe that Justin Baldoni crossed boundaries and created an unsafe environment, or maybe a sub-optimally professional environment. But I also believe that the sexual harassment claim was a strategic escalation of a power struggle that emerged after Blake lost narrative control after the It Ends With Us press tour, after a long and problematic power struggle for control of this movie. And I think that flattening this into a clean victim-villain story is, quite frankly, intellectually dishonest. So let's get into the more nuanced points of this claim, of what I'm saying, okay? So guys, these Taylor Swift texts are not a sideshow with reference to this case, and I can actually see why the judge released them. And let me tell you why. The texts show Blake describing Justin as a clown, as an annoying actor who thinks he's a writer, as somebody beneath her, and beneath her being the operative term, okay? Those texts are about power, they're about strategy, they're about usurping control of the film, they're about, in Taylor's own words, the long game, and they are distinctly not about her feeling sexually violated or feeling unsafe, okay? And these are her texts to her best friend. If she had been texting Taylor saying, he's making these advances at me and I feel harassed, or I feel really uncomfortable around him, he makes me feel really scared and uncomfortable, I would read this thing very differently. But instead, those texts reveal a mindset of basically contempt and corporate coup energy. Literally in them texts, she refers to herself as Daenerys, and they refer to, Taylor refers to herself as a dragon laced with a bit of Cersei Lannister. This is a conspiracy, guys, and that just is what it is. So I believe that Blake's discomfort was real. I believe that the harassment framing emerged later as a retroactive reframing once the power struggle and the PR thing had already exploded. I don't think that that makes her a liar. I think that that means the narrative was weaponized to regain moral and narrative control. For me, the ethical issue is not that she felt uncomfortable. The ethical issue is that real discomfort was escalated into a legal harassment claim as a nuclear chess move to flip the board once she lost control of the narrative overall. If this was cleanly a director and an actor, that is a clear power differential, right? Director's on top, actor is a subordinate. The sexual harassment stuff, really, there is a lot of power there. But that's not the power dynamic here. Blake is vastly more famous, wealthier, more connected, and has an A-list husband and more industry leverage. Justin is a first-time actor turned director who needed her name recognition and was, quite frankly, structurally replaceable. That does not mean that he couldn't harass her, but it does mean that this is not a classic powerful man coercing a powerless woman situation. What I think that Justin did do wrong is create a psychologically unsafe environment that blurred professional boundaries as a leader. I think he ran that set too informally and failed to maintain director-actor distance and failed to protect his lead actor emotionally. And I also believe he crossed boundaries and did things that were inappropriate in a workplace context. And I believe that when you're a director, everything that you do has to be above reproach. And I think he really should have kept things to the letter super formal with someone like Blake Lively, who he doesn't clearly have power over, and who there is a bit of a power, a power equity or power superiority that is counteractive to what the actor-director superiority dynamic should really be, okay? There is evidence. So now let's talk more specifically about the claims, right? One of the major claims that Blake Lively is making in this case is that he, for instance, entered her trailer while she was breastfeeding or changing inappropriately. There is evidence, and there are direct text messages where Blake literally invites Justin Baldoni into her trailer while she's breastfeeding. She's like, oh yeah, come on in, or whatever. You know what I mean? So that clearly establishes a precedent of, okay, it's okay for me to do this. That said, Blake Lively, at any point when their relationship started to sour, it is totally within her right to withdraw consent from that kind of access to her. There is nothing wrong with doing that, right? The thing is, what it does establish is that the boundaries were not clearly defined. And plausibly speaking, Justin Baldoni could have been confused about the boundaries, and it probably isn't a black and white moment when things flipped into from being a healthy working relationship into being outright adversarial. And probably, based on those text messages between Taylor and Blake, that adversarial component probably flipped way before Justin really knew it flipped, right? Because she was playing game on him. She was running game on him. So that creates massive ambiguity about what is inappropriate versus what was Blake retaliating against Justin, winning in the court of public opinion with the It Ends With Us press cycle, okay? And here's where I want to make things a little bit more nuanced so we can really get into Blake Lively's mind, okay? Blake was playing a domestic violence victim while being directed by a man that she fundamentally did not respect. Justin had, quote, power over her on the set, and she resented that power. Also, I'm not going to say too much about it because I don't want to catch a C and D. All I know is that Ryan Reynolds broke up with Scarlett Johansson when she had too much of a career. And ever since Ryan Reynolds has been married to Blake Lively, she's been barefoot and pregnant in the house, with the exception of this movie, It Ends With Us, okay? So I'm just going to leave that there when talking about a movie about, anyway, the movie with the themes that the themes are about, okay? So the themes of this movie, the director-actor hierarchy, and her personal resentment for Justin, I think created a combustible psychological situation. And quite frankly, I do think that there's an element of transference here. I think that transference played a role in how she came to experience his behavior. So meaning, what I'm saying is that her psychological reality, like people are like, oh, she's lying. I don't think that lying is an accurate word for what is happening here. Because I think in her mind, if you hooked her up to a lie detector and asked her today, did Justin Baldoni sexually harass me? I think it would say, and if she said yes, I think the lie detector would say, she's telling the truth. The other thing that's really key to me is that you don't start hearing the term sexual harassment until Blake lost control of the press narrative, okay? Me interjecting, and now it's come out in the filings from yesterday that Ryan Reynolds felt that Justin Baldoni needed some kind of consequences. To my point. You see her trying to take control of the movie. You see her writing that PGA letter. You see her writing letters to Sony and Wayfair and all these different things. You see her plotting and scheming with her husband and with her friend. But you don't hear her say, he's sexually harassing me. Now, does the fact that she didn't identify it as harassment until after the fact, or until after the relationship goes sour, mean definitively that she did not experience harassment? No. Because in a lot of cases, women oftentimes may not understand or conceptualize the things that they experience as harassment until after the fact. But what I am saying is that it's a little bit of a red flag. That's all. The claim of sexual harassment emerges after the public dragged her during the It's End With Us press tour for being inappropriate about the themes of the movie. And I think that timing matters, and it suggests a narrative escalation rather than it being a primary grievance. But once again, that does not mean that I do not think that Blake experienced Justin Baldoni's behavior as inappropriate and making her uncomfortable. And that does not mean that I think that Justin Baldoni acted perfectly and did not act in an unprofessional manner and potentially run a set that did not have appropriate boundaries, especially given the power differential. Because if he had run a set with appropriate boundaries, none of this shit would be fucking happening. So I think the blood is on both of their hands, okay? I think the film set is inherently a blurry environment where physical contact and sexual scenes are structurally required. Because not only was he the director and she was the actress, they were co-leads. They were co-leads of a people in a domestic violence but emotional and sexual relationship, okay? So that unintended kissing and forced kissing stuff that she's talking about, girl, technically speaking, you could argue that that's part of the job description. The boundaries here, I feel, were ambiguous. I'm not a lawyer, though. Ask a lawyer, okay? Don't ask me. I think that her thoughts about what happened with her and Justin changed after their relationship broke down and after he beat her in the court of public opinion. And I think that that's really key and really critical to remember. So here's my final position, okay? I do think that Blake Lively is an imperfect victim. I do think that the way that people are disparaging her in the press goes above and beyond the situation and the reality of the fact situation. Because I think in the fact situation, I think that both parties are guilty. I think they both mishandled the situation. And I think this ultimately is a very messy power struggle between two wealthy people struggling for power over a movie, okay? I believe that Blake's sexual discomfort was real and valid, and I do believe that Justin crossed boundaries and created an unsafe environment. But I also believe that the claim was a strategic escalation of a power struggle that had already gone nuclear. I also believe that both of them behaved badly and both contributed to how ugly the situation became. I do not think this is a clean villain-victim story, and I don't think that flattening it on either side, on Blake Lively's side or on Justin Baldoni's side, I don't think that that helps anybody, and I don't think that that is accurate, okay? So what do I think a just outcome should be? I think both cases should be dismissed. Justin's case has been dismissed already. I think that Blake Lively's case should be dismissed as well. That's what I think, okay? I think there should be a mutual non-disparagement agreement, and I think both these people should shut the fuck up about each other and never work together again, and just go about living their lives, okay? I think this does belong in the imperfect victim category, but it's also not a Me Too hero narrative category, okay? So in conclusion, disliking Blake Lively and thinking that she's got a stank face does not mean that she can't be harassed, okay? But taking sexual discomfort seriously does not mean that you have to endorse every legal escalation of it. This case is psychologically complex, legally messy, and morally non-binary. And pretending otherwise, I think, is lazy and is binary thinking, okay? So that is my long-winded take on the Blake Lively Justin Baldoni case. I hope that you guys see that I do actually have a more nuanced take, and I hope that this is to the standard that you expect from me on this channel, okay? But that's what I think. You don't have to agree with me, but that's my opinion, and that's what I gotta say. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.